Hello and welcome to Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast show. Once again, profiling the biggest thought leaders and personalities in the world of business and technology and making their stories more human and more close to everything we're doing nowadays. Once again, we are powered by our publications and our platforms, citiesabc.com, businessabc.net, sportsabc.org, and wisdomia.ai. I'm quite excited today to welcome someone that became very close to my work and as well to my spirit in a lot of ways. And someone that went through a lot of personal challenges, but became one of the most inspiring people I met. And I hope that will be the first, but a lot of multiple times that she will be with us in this series and in other things we're going to be doing today. So I welcome to our series Louize Clark. And Louize is a personality and a force of nature that you cannot put in a box, because she brings a lot of different capacities, from a personal coach to an AI and digital transformation strategist and consultant that brings over 25 years of experience working with Fortune 500 and FTSE 100 companies, including the HEINEKEN Company and the Anheuser-Busch InBev and Arcadia Group, just to mention a few. Louize specializes in helping businesses when it comes to adoption of digital transformation and artificial intelligence. And as well, she's been an advocate and as well a very strong strategist in the use of digital twin integration, both for construction, healthcare, and education. And as well, she has a lot of experience in the areas of risk management, policy development, and spanning multiple sectors, that including hospitality, education, training, and construction. Louize is the founder of Keeping Ahead, consultancy that offers tailored strategies to integrate cutting-edge AI technologies that embrace a future-ready mindset. She's as well a thought leadership personality that has been working especially in the areas of personal business coaching, personal development, and in parallel, she's been working as a strategist advising global campaigns for high-profile events such as the FIFA World Cup, Wimbledon, Boodles, the Open, and numerous UK festivals. Louize is an NLP master practitioner and international recognized life coach, and is an expert in the areas of mental health and emotional intelligence and cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Some of the work she's been doing is coaching over 100 personalities and individuals globally, with deep insights into human behavior and cultural dynamics. And as well, she's been awarded the Leadership Academy at Tony Robbins USA. And Louize was one of the beta testers for ChatGPT. So I think I will just hold for now. I think the list is much bigger. And I think just in terms of education, she holds an honors in law and a master of science in international human resource management and an extended degree in communication across culture from the University of Bedfordshire. Louize, it's an honor to have you here. I'm quite excited to talk in this place with you, but as well share your fantastic story and your achievements to our audience. Welcome to the series.
Thank you very much, Dinis. It's lovely to be here, and thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing how this goes.
So, Louize, you have a fantastic and I would say challenging story that I think most of the people that work with you don't realize, because you're a very successful woman, both in terms of business, intelligence, and strategy, even the academia. But your story starts with a lot of quite challenging background. So before we go to your success, I would like a bit of your background and whatever you want to share with our audience. But as well, I think people listening to us, they normally, when we are with the person that is quite successful, we see the success, we don't see what comes below and before. And I think this is more important than ever. And it was always important, but nowadays, even more. So I would like to hear about your story.
Okay, thank you. It does start from a very young age. So I grew up in a town in Luton, called Luton in Bedfordshire. And I grew up in a very domestic violent household. And I was probably what they refer to as a latchkey kid. So from sort of 8 years old, I was out on the streets as late as I could do because I didn't want to be at home, which then led to me being what I now know is exploited by older people in gangs. And that put me on a path of exploitation criminally. They manipulated me into just challenging situations, which then led me on a path of self-destruct. I went through high school, wasn't very well behaved in high school. I was excluded over 18 times because I had no support at home. My mum worked nights to escape the violence. My dad was a heavy drinker. So I found solace in what I thought was family and support, but actually turned out to be people that were exploiting me for their own gain. And that led on for a lot of time within my teens, which led to me looking for substance abuse, looking at a way in which to escape the pain of one. I escaped the pain by getting out on the street, but then I met with another pain, and then I escaped that through substances. This then led me to as I started to go down that path, I started to meet people who are, in depth, kind of fully ingrained in that path, and that led me into relationships that weren't for my greater good, and I became exploited again in a different way, and was also suffered horrific domestic violence from, I think at 17, I'd already had my jaw broken several times, my eye sockets broken. And at 19, I'd been attacked with a hammer, severely attacked with a hammer, with absolutely I had nothing left in me. And that was the kind of start for me. It wasn't a good start. I had absolutely no qualifications. I didn't understand the world that I was in. I was trying to navigate a new adult world, but with a mentality that was very young, and didn't understand how to do that. And then what happened was I started to educate myself, which was ironic because I hated education at school. It wasn't something that was for me. And then I sort of found a love for it in my very early 20s. Yeah.
Wow. I think it's really, even me, I didn't know the details of the violence that you went through. And as well, I imagined the pain and as well the process of going through not having any place to go and finding family, or something that you can call a family, and getting through a lot of layers of pain and suffer until you reinvent yourself, ironically, with education. So from this process of pain and your personal reinvention, and I think this is very important, because I think most of the people nowadays have a lot of, I would say, there are people that are very blessed and they have everything, but of course they're not conscious about how lucky they are. And then there's other people that complain about everything, but you took ownership of your life still very early, because in the end of the day, most of your childhood and teenage years was you tried to run away from domestic violence and all the challenges you went through. When was the moment that you decided that I have to change? And it was a person, it was you personal, or was it a moment, or what triggered? Because the problem sometimes is how you trick the difference and the change.
So this is something that it's probably new for you to hear, but during that process of being criminally exploited, it led me into the criminal justice system. And I was then incarcerated for a period of time. And I remember sitting there with nobody around me, no support, on my own, incarcerated in a prison cell, thinking, I don't belong here either. I don't fit in. And I sat there and I thought, where do I fit in? And I think that was my journey to understanding that this whole feeling of fitting in is me. It's not something external. I'm constantly putting or giving power to things that are external, expecting some kind of validation or some kind of light bulb moment where everything is going to piece together. But what I realized in that moment was actually all of that sits within me, and it's me that's got to turn that light on. It's me that's got to drive that forward. It's me that's got to feel that contentment and that inner peace. So that was where I realized it. But again, it's very hard to feel that. It's a process. And what I realized, because I thought, I've realized that it's me, the power is with me, I'm just going to turn the light on. But it doesn't work like that, because what you have to do is you have to take all of those layers back, and you have to look at yourself from all different angles and start to self-reflect and understand your journey, what got you to there, but then heal every single part of that. And that started my process. But what I realized during that process, one thing I thought was I wanted to do well, because I'd done poorly at school and because I'd been quite I'd been in trouble, and I wanted to then right that wrong. I then thought, okay, I shifted. So I knew that it was me that had the power, but what I did was I ended up shifting into education, and education in some way became my vice, my outlet, my coping mechanism. So I didn't heal fully at that stage, but what I did was I shifted that needle into something that was more promising, that was better for me while I worked on myself. But that would have been the defining moment.
And how old were you? I'm just curious to hear that part. And that were
19.
Wow. So you were still a kid.
Yeah, it started when I was 17, and by 19 was the point where I realised that. Yeah.
And tell us then about how you start the process of education, and of course the person that you are now, that you became, of course, highly educated and a global personality as well, and in the UK, working in a lot of places, from the House of Lords to a lot of other places, and from GDP. So how did it go then? Because there's this moment you were a kid and suddenly you blossom in something completely different out of that pain, and I'm sure that will be always inside of you. But it's one thing that I always realize is the process of change for everyone, and change is the most important thing, is how you change and how you empower yourself, and of course that's a massive difficulty.
Yeah. So from that point, when I realised that I needed to make that change, I knew that education was the missing piece, because it was where when I was younger, I didn't have any interest in it, because I did have the interest. And I still have moments now where I have sort of nostalgia, where I'll go back to a little me in a library and I get this sense of feeling of want. But it was there I thought, well, actually, I need to educate myself, because education, and I think from the violence side of things, when I was being controlled through violence and through exploitation, they had power. And I was always taught that knowledge is power. So I thought, if I learn more knowledge, I will become more powerful. And that's something that no one can take away from me. So I started with things that I could easily digest. So I went into hairdressing because I thought I need to have a job. I need to change my life. And it's not just about education, it's about earning money. So I went into hairdressing. That then opened me up to being in an environment that I was learning and accepting learning, and accepting being sort of taught by somebody else. And that grew then. From there, I went into fashion. And I from that point there, I knew I had to reinvent myself. I'd had a shaved head. I walked around with sort of really, really short, spiky hair, and wore lots of boys' clothes. So I thought, right, I need to reinvent me as a person, figure out who do I need to be in order for this next stage of my life. And that was where I came across Tony Robbins in the first place, because I heard some audio tapes of his, and it was about, you have to become the person that you want to be before you become that person. So you have to start acting like that person. You have to start working towards being that person. So then that was what started me on that. I then sort of went into fashion, from the hairdressing into fashion design, and I approached fashion houses. I went round with my CV, because back then we couldn't send them across on the internet and things, on email. It was, let's go in person. So I printed them out and I went in and I just knocked on people's doors, because I just felt like it was something that I needed to do. So that was what started the journey from there. And then while I was doing that, I had some children, and I enjoyed working in the fashion house. It was a well-known fashion brand. I worked in their sustainability section. We developed one of the carbon footprints for the brand. And I enjoyed being what I would class as normal at that time, because I believed that having a job, working, was what was classed as normal. And that continued for some time. Yeah.
Well, that's well, super inspiring, but as well super powerful. You did all of that on your own without support, and as well you took your life and you shifted in a completely different way. So, well, first of all, kudos for that, but it's quite powerful and challenging. So from that, you became strategist from the fashion experience. So tell us about then when your career started going, and a bit of this history, and then when it came to your present venture, and the things that you're doing right now with your business, which is a lot, like I mentioned in my intro.
Yes. So I actually moved from the fashion house, because what I realised when I was in that role was, again, that didn't fulfil my need for knowledge. And I thought, well, actually, what do I want to look at? And there was something that kept coming up and up and again and again, and it was law. Law governs everything. And I have a real passion for law, because everything that we do is governed by some kind of rule, regulation, directive, or legislation. So I decided actually that I wanted to study law, which, given my background, was quite a challenge. However, I went to the Law Society and I said, I want to study as a degree. And backwards and forwards we went, and the Law Society gave me their approval and said, actually, you're fine to practice law. So I asked them for a thing where I wanted to have a level playing field. So I spoke with my lecturers I spoke with the faculty of law, and I said, I don't want them to know. So nobody knew, which was really good for me. What happened then was I won numerous awards through university. I won a scholarship for my own ability. And then when I came to accept my degree, the Master of the Rolls at the time, Lord Neuenberger, had heard about my past. And actually we developed something called Ban the Box. And Ban the Box was an initiative to say that people shouldn't be held back from learning because of their past. And actually learning should be accessible to all, regardless of your background. Because actually, if people are willing to rehabilitate and to learn and educate themselves, then they shouldn't have that held back. So that went through. Ban the Box was an initiative that went forward, which was fantastic. And then from there, I thought, right, well, there's nothing going to hold me back. I believe that if you believe in something strong enough and you go after it, then things will happen. So I approached Anheuser-Busch actually while I was at university. I was an older student, and I went to work for Anheuser-Busch, which is the owner of sort of Budweiser, Stella Artois, and a big portfolio of beer brands. I worked for them in their supply chain to really understand logistics and how that works, and then into advertising, marketing, trade activation, which then started my journey into artificial intelligence, into augmented reality, into VR, into experientials. And that was where this whole, as to how I've got to where I am now, really started, because it exposed me to things that I'd really out of my mind before, but I sort of fell in love with understanding this new innovation and technology and how it could enhance us as an organisation, but also, how we do things as individually. So that was where I got to now.
So from becoming a lawyer and study, and then becoming as well a technologist and an expert in technology. So a bit of that journey as well. Of course, you create as well the company, Keeping Ahead. So tell us about that creation of the company, that experience from legal to technology, and especially with the company that you created. How you see this from being a student to become an entrepreneur, and as well to start working with these organizations and start building a strong business and a strong reputation on these areas.
So Keeping Ahead is actually two things. The name came because it's about being innovative and creative. It's about being thought leaders and having the best tools to be able to keep ahead. That's the reason why I've named it that. But there's also another reason, and that is, you're nothing unless you keep ahead. So it's all about combining, because what I realized in my role in the legal profession, I then decided to go into to do my master's in international HR management, because I have a real interest in culture, in understanding different communities, different cultures, different religious beliefs, and understanding how they do things in business, because law obviously is across, you have to take into consideration different jurisdictions. And I noticed how law was different. So what I realized throughout that, though, is that there are certain areas that people all struggle with. And I don't like to generalize, obviously, with being a neuro-linguistic programmer, we don't generalize. However, what I did notice is there are similarities, regardless of what country you are in the world, what job role that you have, what age you are, that we all have these needs that need to be fulfilled. And if they're not met, then people struggle. So what I wanted to do was to show that actually you can be innovative and creative, but at the same time, you've got to master your own mind. And that's where the combination of business coaching and when I work with companies is that I really ensure that they are, one, looking after themselves to be able to give them to get the best out of what it is as their business. But it's two things.
So you touched that you discover, especially technology, immersive experience, VR, and a lot of different things. In parallel, you were as well studying and starting your work as a professional coach, and you mentioned Tony Robbins. How did you make the balance between these two things? Because I think one of the paradox right now is how you create the balance on the personal side as well we keep the innovation and the learning part of the technology and the business side?
I think in order to be the best at anything, you have to master yourself. You have to manage yourself. It's the most important thing. And it's understanding what your needs are, what your vision is, what your purpose is, what your meaning is. Because when we have that and we understand ourselves and we understand what our vision is and where we want to be, then that allows us to be more creative. That allows us to tap into our innovation. That allows us to be able to be the best version that we can be. So I think it's really important when you're looking at them you don't look at them in silos. They're part of who you are as an ecosystem. Regardless of what area you're in, whether you're a person who wants certainty and you're happy in just doing your day-to-day role and you're not looking for promotion or status or anything like that, there is still an element of wanting to be the best version of that. So in order to do that, you have to master yourself. They sit together. They're so important.
And I want to touch right now, so you have quite a lot of experience in technology, and like you mentioned, you work with ChatGPT. We were one of the first testers. So a bit of that story, and especially on the innovation around technology. And as well, I know that one of your super skills is how you apply these in practical to businesses, because I think it's the biggest challenge. I think in this channel, we've been having some of the top people technology in the world. But normally my paradox is if I speak with any business, 99% have no clue about what you're talking here, or some people, yes, or they know a bit of the theory, but then the practice, they hardly know how to do it.
I think you've touched on a really important point. And I think at the moment, we've got this, since sort of ChatGPT launched in November 22, there's this sudden urge for everybody wanting to use AI or to be seen to be using the word AI in their business. But, AI has been there for many, many years. I worked on a project, sort of over a decade ago in kitchens, making warewashers smart. But all of a sudden, our businesses want to use it. But what they're not doing is stopping for a moment and looking at what problem their business is trying to solve. And I think this is the key thing. It's sitting down with a business, understanding what their problem is that they have, looking at their data now and how they manage their data. What's the data flow look like? Is there any bottlenecks? Is there any, problems? And then looking at the solution. But it's, people have to be ready. They have to have a readiness around their business. They have to be ready to adopt that. And that's not just about technology, which people think, oh, okay, we can buy new technology. But there's a huge cultural shift that people need to be prepared for. There is a real divide between people embracing this technology, seeing how good it can be and how it will help their business move forward. But there's also people that look at it and are scared of it, are fearful and think it's going to take their job, and they're actually paralyzed by fear and don't want to go near it. But then we have some other people that see it for in the future and are really scared by what they see what's going to happen down the line. And I think this is the issue that companies have. It's not just understanding their problem, their data flow and the system they need, but understanding how they're going to implement that with the staff that they have. And there is a real piece around educating people, educating all tiers, but also respecting at the same time everyone's belief around this system. Because what we have seen, if you're not a technologist, if you've not been around this or technology and looking at sort of even just sort of data analytics from years ago, if you've not been in that or had that in your role, and all of a sudden you've got AI everywhere, it's a very scary place to be. So I feel that there is many problems and challenges that businesses face.
So let's come back to this. So first of all, I think in this, of course, I interview some of the top people of NVIDIA and some of the high-profile AI experts here, from Ben Gorsley to Nick Bostrom. So one of the things I found is right now is a paradox. Okay, there's like a percentage of people like us that are a bit like in the twilight zone of the new matrix, and most of the people, like you said, that are still struggling to learn. So let's go back to the part of education and learning. So because at the end of the day, these tools are amazing, and I'm not going to be talking about AGI or more advanced things, but let's look just as AI as a tool. And as well, of course, there's artificial intelligence tools, there's digital twin tools applied to construction, healthcare, education, even retail, like you mentioned, in different parts and so forth. And of course, AR, augmented reality, virtual reality, and a lot of different subsets of these technologies. But artificial intelligence is definitely the most revolutionary one. When you're dealing with entrepreneurs, I know that you've been dealing with from the House of Lords to big corporations, Fortune 500. What is kind of the part that you think that is necessary right now for business to deal with technology, firstly, digital transformation, and thirdly with AI?
I think that right now businesses need to look at their sector, and they need to look at their sector as a whole and as an ecosystem. So if we was to say, look at construction, for instance, as an example, that is a aging sector. It's probably, although they're building continually, technology-wise, it's an aging sector and going backwards. But if we look at their ecosystem, part of that people that feed into that chain are advancing at speed and scale. So I think they need to really look at their industry, at their partners, and look at the challenges that could potentially, if they don't adopt technology, the right technology, what that looks like. Because a lot of companies are operating in silos as well. So and there's a lot of fragmented data. So they need to look at it, and they need to be prepared and understand what's coming, understand what it looks like in different industries. Because what we've mentioned there, in terms of the industries that I've worked in healthcare, which has two parts to it. It has the estates, which is in the UK, we have the NHS, and that the estates in the UK are, a lot of them are in disrepair. They're broken down. They need a lot of work. Then we're looking at how do we bring AI for patient healthcare. That's the completely different thing. Fragmented data, procedures, regulations, rules, all of that. But then we look at construction again, there's issues. But then if we looked at hospitality, it's booming. It's been going for some time. Those sectors are going at speed and scale. So I think there's a real divide potentially that's going to come down the line. And it's understanding your sector and who feeds into that and how they're adopting it, what speed they're adopting it, and the tools that they're using.
So let's cut this in pieces, because of course I think the way you put it brilliant, simple, and super non-complex. But of course, there's in one end the fear, and we cannot acknowledge that. And the other, there's the fear, just fear, simply. There's the fear of missing, and at the same time, there's the paralysis. How do you see these three? Because I think we can only kill the fear. It's probably even in your story when you realize that you need it and this is important. And there's a sense of practicality. I want to see your views on this, because I think we can only deep dive. And this happens with my own team, and we build AI. And I would say that a huge part of the team don't know how to use the tools. And of course, in our team, there's no excuses. But if that happens in a company like mine, I see the rest of the world is much more complex. And for instance, you mentioned construction, you mentioned healthcare. For instance, in NHS, even me being in London like you, I see paradoxes of going to one of the top hospitals, and the first floor the computers don't speak with the second floor. And they talk about artificial intelligence. So there's a lot of paradoxes, in some cases stupidity, which is probably worse than paradoxes. But how do you see these layers?
So I think fear is absolutely, it's there. But we have to realize that it's not going anywhere. It's, this technology is here. It's here to stay. And we have to embrace it. And we have to see it for what it is. And I would say at this stage, people should see it as it is, for what it is, but no more than what it is. Because what I think people sometimes do is, visionaries, you and I may see it and we can see what's coming down the line. We can see for what more of it, what it can be. But for some people, I think right now where there's fear, is see it for what it is and no more than what it is. But how can it help your business?
So yeah, I like to put it very synthetic. So if we go by like an ABC, and we have business ABC as well, so I like the ABCs. So from your experience, and I'm talking for people listening to us, okay? Because for instance, I give an example. In the last weeks, I was talking with someone that a very intelligent person that is using technology in a very advanced level, but he told me black and white he never used AI, and I was in shock. And the first thing I ask you, okay, but everything you're doing on your specific area of expertise is already using AI. Did you realize that? And then it was like kind of a twilight zone. It's the person suddenly, okay, at the end of the day, that person is very tech savvy, digital transformed, but never used AI. And ironically, I obliged the person to test one of the AI tools, I think was Claude, and it was mind blowing for the person. So, and this is just one example. But I would like to touch this from that example of sometimes it's just about doing it. But I'm sure in your case, if you're talking about construction, hospitality, it's much more complex. But I want to just touch that. Yeah.
I think that what you've touched on there is education. It's educating people to understand what AI is, what it does, what its capabilities are, and how it applies. Because we've got to look, almost nurture people. There are people that are going to be in your business that are going to be basic people that, and age, I think, plays a huge, part in this as well. But I really feel that it's about educating people as to what AI is, and show them actually, if you listen to things like platforms like Spotify, if you watch things on Netflix, if you watch things on YouTube, there is AI working in there. There is algorithms working in there. And it's showing them actually, this is what it is. It's been around for a while, but it's educating, showing people what it is, and then having layers of education, because it's fast moving, fast evolving. It's, it's changing, and it's showing. I think education is the key thing in order to make this work across any sector. Is educating and giving people digital literacy skills that they need.
So digital literacy is massive. And I know that you have a big passion for education. So that's digital literacy of using the tools properly. Because like you said, I would say that I was in the most poor countries from Africa to the most wealthy countries. Everyone has a smartphone. So in the end of the day, everyone is using AI, whether they want it or not. And it doesn't need to be the most advanced iPhone, or because everyone has like some kind of device, or Samsung or whatever the device that is using already a lot of these algorithms quite advanced, or even Google. So from this, the challenge right now, so there's 400 million SMEs and micro SMEs in the world. And the studies say that 90% are, of course, 90% are the mamas and papas, the small business around the planet that keep building. And then, of course, there's the SMEs and micro SMEs. The challenge is, of course, okay, the big corporations, and we see big corporations like, for instance, some case studies of big corporations that were in the top Fortune 500, and suddenly they just crash completely because they cannot keep with innovation, and suddenly a new player comes and takes the entire business. So that is going to happen faster with all these parts, but the velocity, especially the disruption coming from artificial intelligence, and I think for people listening to us, I cannot create a sense of urgency. It's going to be much more. I would say there's a sense of urgency, but there's a sense as well that you can plan, like you said. There's a sense of planning ahead, and actually a lot of these AI tools would allow you to plan ahead. But there's a sense of chaos, disruption, and as well the fear comes on that level. But so from the fact that you advise a lot of big corporations, is there one case study in particular? For instance, you mentioned digital transformation or digital literacy and AI literacy. A case study that you want to bring, or like a step that you think we can share together? Because I think that's the holy grail that we need to leverage more and more.
So when you say case studies, explain to me what case study you want. So I've got quite a few in my head.
It might be just like for my experience, these were the steps that I think were helping most of the people I've been talking with. Like the case study I mentioned about this person in my network, that I kind of made him realize how important AI was, because initially he was afraid and say, I'm not trained to talk about AI. I'm not trained about this, but the person was. So it's just, and then I'm talking more on the corporate level, or in an organization. It might be a construction company, an healthcare company, or an hospital, or even in any kind of retail company.
Okay, so if we look at, say, the hospital, for instance, the NHS. So we had one case, which is, I won't name the hospital because it's still going through at the moment, but what we had was a situation where one of the theatres needed to be shut. It needed to be shut for a period of time, 14 weeks. They're already facing a real backlog of delays, and this is from the pandemic. So there's delays that have come back and they've been pushed back and pushed back. They're now facing another 14 weeks, which would put some of those first level cases of meeting them back, 18 months. And as you can imagine, for the NHS, that's a huge ask. And there's a lot of risk around that in terms of managing. So we looked at, actually, can we optimize the workspace that you've got to maybe put in another theatre? So it was as a pilot, it was to show, look, these are the tools that are available. Can we, with the space that you've got, by shutting that, we do have a lot of other space. We can ensure that the patient accessibility around the hospital is still okay. It's not damaged. It's not reduced. So there's the flow of people will still be able to go. Partially sighted, disabled people will still be able to access your building. But actually, there is some space that's not being utilised that we could utilise and set up a temporary facility in order to be able to carry out the operations that were needed. So when we did that, the theatre shut for its repair. There was a temporary theatre put in. And by the end of that period of time, they had actually caught up and exceeded their operations. So their operations had gone ahead of schedule. It was running absolutely fine. And when they opened that second theatre, they realised actually they could reduce their wait times significantly. Now, that was only on one floor of a building. And that building, the space, what we have, especially with the NHS, is we have a lot of wastage of space, which, historically it was put there and it was designed with a thought with the way in which it worked back then. But as we know, things are always constantly changing and evolving. And what they needed to do here was actually say, okay, let's go with something different. Let's try it. And by trying it, it improved drastically. And now we're looking at implementing two types of twin, one for the estates and the management of the building in terms of, operational efficiency in improving the energy usage and consumptions and looking at that side of things, but also patient optimization when they're going through the facility, because this is really key. And it's, people don't like change because they think, well, how are the patients going to be able to access? And what you can do when you have that tool, like a digital twin, is being able to show them quickly and say, look, this is what it can look like. And then you can, really sit down and say, well, actually, let's, if they don't want to do that, you can really have a little bit of a play around with that. And I think that there was a defining moment, especially for me, to show this is really powerful in this situation. And if that can be mirrored across, there's a lot that can be done. Yeah.
As a great example. And the digital twins is a great way because, as you mentioned before, that you work as well in the sustainability cases. So there's a lot of uses. And of course, the digital twin is a use of digital tools that integrate AI data to work on this. So I know that you are as well, you participated in one of my last books about digital twins in construction. So can you elaborate as well one case study in construction, like you just mentioned, in this case of theater, but integrating this in construction? I think it's really important, these case studies, and for people listening to us, I think it's what I want to bring more is, because you talk about the big moon shoots or shots, but I think we need much more to shoot on the earth first and make earth a bit more practical.
Again, I think with construction, we are at a really critical point in terms of our infrastructure. We have, for instance, we have 20% of London buildings will be inlettable within 2030 unless we repurpose them. We don't want to have to knock them down, but we can repurpose them. So at the moment where I'm working with retrofits, it's looking at the infrastructure that's currently there. But also what we've got to remember is we had the disaster that was a horrific disaster, which was Grenfell Tower. And that was such a tragedy that could have been avoided in some way if we had that traceability and that thread of data and been able to see everything that was used on that job. So at the moment it's looking, and I have numerous case studies where I'm working on retrofits and putting digital twins in there. And they vary from small buildings to big manufacturing units and also high-rise flats. But it's for construction, being able to use that technology to have a clear line and golden thread of traceability, accountability, and being able to pull that all together as a single source of truth is so valuable. And we have to look at the bigger picture as well. Because we've got legislation in the construction space, we've got legislation as to now moving forward with our Building Safety Act, our Fire Act, and this golden thread of data. What's going to happen, and I've met with numerous legal companies and also insurance companies, is insurance rules and regulations are going to change if they do not adopt technology. This is a huge financial cost to companies, will be down the line. So I'd say yes, at the moment, it's in terms of a case study, I would just say at the moment that there's so many going on in the retrofit market that I'm working on, which is a market that's met with a lot of challenges because there's a lot of fragmented data, a lot of data that's, still on paper, and it's digitizing that. but actually there are tools that you can make digital very quickly. And this is using the power of AI and predictive. You can have some that has gone from a 2D and you can make a 3D from that using a little bit of predictive, which will help. So there's lots going on. I hope that answered the question.
No, you answer, and I think this touches as well the risks, because in the end of the day, the biggest risk is that you can lose your business, and of course, definitely you will be behind, because of course the velocity is going in a tenfold. So moving forward, so in terms of your work so we talked the technology and the business and case studies. So you have been coaching over 100 individuals globally, and you build quite a substantial balance, which is for me quite tricky. How you keep your business acumen, and you are a very sharp businesswoman in the good way, and in the sense that you do your homework and you are prepared. And you are as well coaching behavior and cultural dynamics. So I would like to hear about that, and as well sharing with our audience how you balance these two sides of you.
Discipline is really key. So I'm very disciplined in how I balance it. But I think that they go together. And when we see them as separate, that's when I feel that we'll always see us as two sides, but actually it's holistic, see it as a whole. Well, these are key elements that we need to have in order for us to be balanced, as I said before, to be the sort of the best version. So it all comes down to understanding self, having emotional regulation, being able to control your emotions, which is what we've spoken before about. Emotional intelligence is so key in everything. It's when we talk about the golden thread of construction data, that's one thing. But I would say what we really need is the golden thread of ourselves and understanding ourselves and every part of us. That's what a
wonderful thing, but it's better said than done, like they say. So from this discipline, and as well from the people you've been coaching, is there any trend or data that you want to share? For instance, one of the things I find very difficult for me as a leader is to find the balance between the human side and the getting results. So I would like to touch that, because you are a leader as well. And of course, you have both emotional intelligence and mental health. And sometimes, of course, one of the challenges that sometimes getting things done implies, like I said, process and discipline. And discipline is probably the most difficult. But as well, there's a lot of personal development, because people come with their background, they come with their pains, with their things, and they mix things. And as well, they want to be guided, which is quite difficult in a time of technology. So a bit how you look at this discipline and leadership and the two sides of the balance.
It's very interesting, because one of the key things around discipline, a lot of it, so if we look at imposter syndrome, which I think it impacts entrepreneurs, business leaders, it's definitely middle management and upper management, there is a level of imposter syndrome, and that prevents people from getting things done. That prevents people from it. They procrastinate and they start to put things off, or they'll take things on. Now that in itself is an issue that needs to be resolved by understanding yourself, and there are steps in which you can do to take, and this is your personal development. And I think that part is really key. The personal development is really key. I don't want to sort of go off topic there, but one of the things you mentioned about being really hard to manage and getting things done, a lot of that it could be down to unresolved issues that you have, or limiting beliefs that you've installed in yourself. And also when we look at burnout, for instance, burnout is something that impacts lots of professionals at high level, lots of entrepreneurs. And when we break that down and we understand the stages in which we get that, it all starts in the beginning. It starts at the first stage, which is classed as the honeymoon stage, or when you would when you would get a new job, or when you would go for promotion, or when you would, for an entrepreneur, you would see a new shiny something and you'd be like, yes, I want to go with that. And what happens is you would get that and you would put all into that. You would fill your cup up. You would go over and beyond. Same as if you've got a new job or a new promotion, you've got into a new role, you will take that role on, but you will do extra things to compensate. And what happens then is that role it's a certain amount of expansion and growth built into it when you take that on. So if we're an entrepreneur, you have an idea that takes a certain amount of development, and you know that if you single point of focus onto that, you could move on to the next. But what we do, and this is the thing that we have, is we will then have, but this could go on and that could go on, and we start to overcomplicate. And when we overcomplicate, that prevents us from doing things. So it's really understanding, and it is looking at yourself, and it's that self-reflection and saying, okay, for me moving forward now to instead of taking stuff on, and I need to start a task small and finish the task, and give yourself praise as you do that. Does that make sense?
No. It's very important. I think you touched the very important thing, especially the start with the small, cutting in small parts, putting the discipline and the process in place. I think that's the biggest part because people get overwhelmed.
It's overwhelming. It's because at the beginning, a lot of the time when you take on a project or you start something new, you want to be seen to be doing things. You want to be seen to be excelling. But actually, what you need to do is small tasks, and then you get your dopamine. Because again, we feed from dopamine. We feel, well, this is what we need. If we complete a task, we get dopamine, we go on to the next one. But what happens is when we stop completing those tasks and we start to procrastinate, we don't get that dopamine hit. And that means that we start to then it hold us back, and that's when we get overwhelmed, and that's when that leads to burnout and all other things. And that's why business, when you look down the line, they can sometimes struggle because they haven't, if they're single point focused and just focused on one thing.
Yeah, that's the focus is the key thing, actually. For me in particular, I speak on my own, and as well, it's very difficult because you have to juggle between different priorities, between closing a business that takes more time than you thought, or suddenly making even a decision if this business is more important than another. And this is actually, I think, for any entrepreneur, for any business, and even the tasks, the multitasks you have. So one thing I want to touch, and I know that we're passing 1 hour, so I want to be conscious of your time, but one key thing. So you have a professional master practitioner in different parts of life, coach, as well as you are an expert in emotional intelligence and cognitive behavioral therapy. So tell us a bit how we can actually bring these three things in what you just said, but from a professional level, and as well from people listening to us, because I think when you mention mental health, everyone gets a bit afraid, and they always put this in, no, it's not me, I don't have any problems. Then we keep it for ourselves. But then emotional intelligence is completely different, and then cognitive behavior is even more different. So we can a bit first describe probably a bit of the way you see these three things, because you have expertise on this, but as well how people listening to us can actually apply this to business and to their dealings with business, with teams, with technology, and so forth.
So you're right. When people mention mental health, it's one of those things that people get a bit fearful of, or a bit scared. Or some people now, what I am finding is people are saying, oh, they've heard it so much. What I always say to people is, would you go to the doctor and say, I have physical health? You wouldn't. You would go and say, I have pain in my arm, in my leg, in my back. So with mental health, what I always do is there's always, people will have cognitive disorders and things that will affect their mental ability. But actually, it's to really look at that and dissect that and understand what that mental health is. Is it you're fearful? Is it you're scared? How is it presenting itself? And understand that, because things like anxiety is the apprehension of fear itself. So fear of what may come. So it's sitting down with somebody and saying, okay, what is it that you're fearful of? And I have tools that I sit with people in terms of emotional wheels, mental health wheels. And I if it's mental health, then I always say that in they're struggling, that's when they should seek advice from somebody that is qualified and legally trained. And I feel that there should be support around in a workplace to manage that transition and having that. With emotions, emotional regulation and emotional intelligence is incredibly important for work, for businesses. And I feel that this is something that is, if business leaders, managers, and anyone that is managing staff understands emotional intelligence and understands the benefit of what that can bring to a company, they will see an increase in proactivity within their staff, because it's understanding behaviors, understanding patterns, understanding tone, expression, reaction, and being able to have empathy, have compassion. And what if you can bring that to your staff, ultimately your staff will be they will be a bit more at ease, and then you'll increase productivity. There's lots of studies which I can share with your listeners and give some information as to where to find the research on this. But there's actually lots of research to show that when a manager has been trained in emotional intelligence and practices that with their staff and encourages their staff, productivity increases threefold and twofold. So that in itself, productivity increases threefold. And revenue increases twofold, which and your reduction in churn is a lot lower.
So let's touch the emotional intelligence. So I want to deep dive because I know mental health is much more sensitive. Like you said, it goes to professional, but emotional intelligence, anyone can actually deal with that. So you and me are involved in a couple of things, and myself, I'm learning a lot, but you're the expert. But one of the things when it comes to emotional intelligence, like you said, there's a huge part in terms of productivity, and as well the idea of emotional intelligence or emotional quotient (EQ). There's a huge capacity right now to bring this for training-driven programs that can improve the productivity of companies. And one of the things that I've been studying myself is that there's the meaningful role in mental and physical health, and as well the part of contributing greatly to individual success in both personal and professional lives. And like you said, there's the productivity leveraging. So like I said, there's the managers, there's the people that are managed, and there's right now there's as well all the tools we use, which sometimes are massive distraction. So how do you balance this kind of concept of emotional intelligence between the personal part, and I always say the human to human, or the human self, the human to human, and the human to machine? I would like to touch a bit on these three angles.
Okay, say the three again. Sorry, just let me get the three again.
So one is the human self. So you, yourself, and managing emotional intelligence. The second is human to human. So you with other peers, managers, and people. And the third one is human to machine, because in the end of the day, we pass a huge amount of time with machines. The machines might be our AIs, might be our tools, our emails, our different things. But this is key. And as well, most of the productivities are manage these three layers.
Yes. So with yourself, I think managing emotional intelligence within yourself is that understanding that you have no control over anything external. It's two worlds, internal world and external world. You have no control over what happens externally, what somebody does, says, thinks, feels, reacts, doesn't react. You only have control how you choose to react to it in that situation. And it's understanding sometimes that our reactions or our reaction to things could be the cause of our own suffering. So it's sitting down and understanding. And this, again, goes back to the personal development. And it's really key that we understand ourselves and doing our personal development. Now, when it comes to with others, if you're self-regulated and self-aware, then you have empathy and compassion to other people. You can understand tone, facial expressions. You can understand by looking and having conversations with them if they are needing support, or because a lot of the time we're so into ourselves that if somebody says something, we will think, oh, that's us, they're attacking us, when actually it's nothing to do with us. It's their internal dialogue or their internal struggle. And it's when you have these skills, it allows you to be more compassionate. And I think with managers, it's understanding there are many factors into, I mean, just for me, for instance, I have, businesses, I have a family, I'm go traveling, all of these things that make up who I am. Same as everybody else. Everybody else has their own factors and their own wheel, shall we say, wheel of life. So having these tools, it significantly, being able to do this and have the tools to be able to, when you're conversing with somebody else, significantly changes the dynamic in a positive way. And obviously that in businesses, it's so key, because when we look at why do people leave jobs, one of the majority, the I don't know the actual number off the top of my head, but it's a very high stat, is that people leave because of a manager, and the way in which they were managed. But if they had tools like, emotional intelligence tools, then that could, drastically change that. And then I think, look, with machines, we're never going to change. We're never going to replace the human. And I think this is really key, but we need to be emotionally intelligent to program the information that's there, because all of this data, all of the data that we put into the machines and that is collating it's learning it from us. Okay. And we need to ensure that the information that's put in there is from an emotionally regulated source. It's learning the right things, because as we said before, it's not going anywhere. It's very, very powerful, and it can be used for good or for bad. And what we want to ensure is that for the sake of humanity, that it's used for the right reasons. And therefore we need to ensure that it's programmed and it's the data that we put into it is intelligent data, because it's, it is to be intelligent. And we are in a a more connected world, but yet we're more disconnected than ever. So I think it's ensuring that if we are going to choose that form of connection, that it's programmed in the right way to ensure that the connection in some way gets met from a human level.
I love it. And you put it always in a very simple and framework. So I think the last part is some of the last questions I want to touch. So we touched about digital twins, we touched about personal developing and emotional intelligence, 3 areas that you have mastered and you are working a lot on these things. So I want to touch right now. So you were one of the beta testers for ChatGPT. Since then, ChatGPT became a powerhouse, even if this, as we are filming this December, the power outage, probably because of its success with Sora and all the different things. So how do you see, especially the radical transformation that is coming? And we touched a bit, but I would like to go a bit deeper because, of course, you're quite technical as well. But applying this radical transformation, because in the end of the day, there's a lot of people, and even me, very kind of concerned with the rapidity of the kind of transformation in the sense of radical capacities. And of course, I have to use the word AGI, Augmented General Intelligence, because we're going to have it next year. And I want to just quote something that it was Sam Altman that said it. We're filming this on the 13th of December, 2024. And one of the things that Sam Altman said, and this I think is quite important for what is happening right now, and I'm going to quote him, but I want to highlight this. He said that the arrival of artificial intelligence, super intelligence, will be more intense than people think. And we need new economical models to compensate creators for AI. And yet first, the introduction of AGI and the next level of super intelligence beyond that will have minimal effect. But eventually, it will be more intense than people think. So, and of course, like in every major technological achievement, there's been a significant job displacement. So this is just one element, job displacement, and this is actually not my words, the words of Sam Altman. But there's as well paradoxes, and I'm seeing that already, even the work I'm doing with artificial intelligence. I'm sure you as well, and you work with ChatGPT. But there's one thing is that some of these tools can actually program everything we're doing. And you can program it in a way that it can actually replace a lot of different things. And you mentioned digital twins. We can actually, for instance, just for people listening to us, and I'm going a bit more technical, but if you just analyze your own data on ChatGPT, you're going to be able to look at a lot of the things we discussed in all this interview and reverse engineer it. But this implies a huge amount of expertise and levels of knowledge that most of the people don't have. So for me, the question is, from your experience, how can we, first of all, manage the disruption? And second, look at these levels of disruption without, it's like a tsunami. It starts small until it takes everything. I don't think we'll be like that, but it can become a tsunami, because in the end of the day, if we start having AGIs as powerful as some of the ones that we are creating, this is going to be quite tricky. And we're talking about taking this to business, but we take this in a lot of question marks. So I know that is a big question, but I would like to hear your opinion.
I mean, I think that quote is right. I think that many people aren't prepared for what's going to come down the line. You know, if we look at the huge shift that we've had since ChatGPT launched, and the only difference is we've had obviously tools there in terms of artificial intelligence tools for many years. Obviously, this new generative AI is sort of creative. I call it the creative visionary, but it's that creative form in which it's not just about predicting and analysing, it's about coming up with creative solutions. And since the difference obviously is that, but also what it's done is it's allowed it to be in the hands of us, into the layperson. Before, you needed to have studied and studied technology, studied data, studied all of them roles, and they were specific roles within, say, an IT department or whatever. Now what we have is people that have no technical ability, but have seen actually these tools can make these things happen really quickly. Or if I've got a really good idea, and I'm not saying or say I have an idea, a big idea, good or negative, they're realizing that there are tools out there that can make it very, very quickly. Now, that is a worry, because we're programming it for not not just for, for good. There's program it for bad. And if we look at the job landscape as to how it is now, this job landscape is not going to look like this for much longer. It's going to change. We're already seeing it. We saw it in supermarkets. We saw it in manufacturing. We see it in picking and packing in warehouses. They've all shifted to automated roles. So we look at that. We look at our younger generation. So going back to construction, we have a huge skill gap. This is a global shortage. This is because what we've done is we've said that in the UK especially, there was a band of people that were, so for my age, we would have told our children, don't go into construction, go into computing. That's the future. So what that's done is it's taken out just organically a huge chunk of maybe practical people. So we've had to look at technology to be able to come in and say, right, these are the jobs that need filling. In construction, UK alone, 285,000 short workers. We've got millions we've got 400,000 in Germany. We've got millions across the globe. We have to bring technology in. And when we bring technology in to do those roles, it eliminates that role. Would we go back to that if we realise as a company, actually, we're more productive, we've got less costs, we don't have to, we've got so many different factors in terms of HR, all of those costs that you've got onboarding, all of those. Would we go back? No. So then what happens? We've now got we're going to have a huge, a huge shift in the way in which working is done. But then what happens to humans? And this is and I do worry about this, because I really do feel that we need skills, we need education, but what we need to have is we need to have resilient, innovative people that can adapt very quickly, because it's a fluid landscape. It's going to be changing and evolving for some time. So what we need to do is I suppose, teach our young people to be adaptable, to be visionary. But I agree. I think there is going to be a huge shift. Yeah, I don't think people realise what's coming down the line. Yeah.
So to finish on a positive line, and I think we passed almost 1 hour now. So I think we agree completely on that. And I think for people listening to us, please take this serious. I think people are not taking it serious. And I think the point is, really, there's no sense of urgency from our politicians, our governments, besides putting some regulatory parts, just tick the box, but they're not endorsing it. So I want to just, because I know that you're very positive and very strategical as well practical. So what would be the pragmatism for the people that are taking this serious, at least that they're considering to take it serious? And you mentioned different industries of construction, healthcare, education, and of course, all of us have to be targeting much, much more education. So just on this subject in particular, what would be the areas that you think, and as well from a personal development, from emotional intelligence, from continuous education, I think one wrap up how we can make this more powerful and more positive for all of us, because these tools in the end they are available for all of us. It's just the way we use it.
Absolutely. They are available for everybody. And I think this is the time to look at your business and think, what's the direction of travel? What are your plans and aspirations? And get your team or your people on board, because if we educate people and we train people in it, you can become a superpower yourself as a business, as for good. And I think it's about using the tools that are there, harnessing the power of them, educating people to not be fearful of it. Because, as much as in the last comment I just said, it was, people aren't prepared, but it's now's the time to be prepared, not be scared, look at what's about, and and educate and train and stay on top of it. Join newsletters and watch and follow as many people as you can to really see what's going on out there, because if you're prepared, then it's a good place to be.
So being prepared, and I think we all need more, all of us, in multiple layers. So Louize, it passed very fast. So one last, just more open question for people listening to us, how they can find you. And of course they will find me a lot here, but more from your direct parts and some of the things that you want to share with the audience about immediate things you write. You have as well the coaching and as well a lot of things on LinkedIn, but a bit more about where the people can find you and engage with you.
Okay, so you can find me at keepingahead.co.uk. That there is about for businesses who are looking to integrate AI into their business. And I hold courses on AI integration, data management, governance, frameworks, maturity, readiness assessments. So that's all on that site. And then there's louiseclark.com. And that from there, it's got my business consulting, and there's lots of tools on there. If you go down to the bottom around mental health and management and emotional health, there's lots of free downloads on there where you can look at having the tools that you need to be able to manage yourself.
Thank you. So for people listening to us, I want to thank you, Louise, and please follow Louise, engage with her, because she has a fantastic sense of pragmatism with a fantastic sense of strategic level, but as well as sense of humanity, which is more important. And I've been learning a lot with you, Louise, in the sense of being kind, focused, but as well precise, because I think, like I said, you need to get it done, and you can get all the strategy in the world, but you need to get it done. So thank you for being here. It's been an honor, and I think we'll be the first of a lot.